What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Davey Sports Podcast. This is episode 176, recording this late at night on Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. So you'll hear this on Wednesday, January 22nd. Just want to talk about a few things, starting with the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement that was earlier today. Ichiro got in, one vote short of unanimous. CC Sabathia also got in, as did Billy Wagner. I thought all three were deserving. This was my prediction basically of the three guys that I thought were going to get in. Carlos Beltran fell a little bit short. He should get in next year because the first timers next year, none of those guys are Hall of Famers. So I would be shocked if Beltran didn't get the jump necessary to get in, especially because Wagner was on his 10th and final ballot, so people had to make room for him. So congrats to Ichiro, CC, and Wagner. Ichiro I saw play at various points, at all points of his career. His prime with Seattle, kind of the post prime, but he was still a good player with the Yankees, and then kind of in his twilight with Miami. So always enjoyed watching him. One of the most fun players I've ever seen. The slap hitting, the just nobody did it the way Ichiro did. The arm and right field, the defense, the base running. He was a great player. Always loved watching him. One of my favorites, non-Padres ever. CC Sabathia. He first caught my eye '07 when he won the AL Cy Young with Cleveland and got them to that ALCS where they lost in 7 games to Boston, who won the World Series. And then the next year at the deadline when he went to Milwaukee, he had that dominant stretch. I went to a Brewers Padres game here in San Diego that he pitched in. I was just like, wow, this dude's going out there pitching complete games in September, 3 days rest, and in Milwaukee's playoff drought. Only played that half season in Milwaukee, but he's still a Wisconsin sports legend. And then obviously a great decade with the Yankees. Helped him win the World Series 2009, his first year there. One of the better Yankee starting pitchers of recent memory, and one of the only left-handers with 250 wins and 30,000 strikeouts. So obviously very deserving for the big fella, and just good for him too. People made a lot of comments about his weight in his playing days, and he's lost weight in his post-playing career and kept it off too. And seems like a really good dude that everyone likes. All his teammates loved him. Seems like he loves his family. So I like CC Sabathia a lot. Good for you, big fella. Billy Wagner. I don't have as much of an opinion on him as I do the others, but the numbers speak for themselves. And he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So happy for Billy Wagner too. All three very deserving, like I said. And I'm just going to close out this brief Hall of Fame segment by saying, why do these writers have to be like this and be like, oh, I'm not going to vote that guy for the Hall of Fame so because nobody should be unanimous? I mean, why do we have these guys like, you can't look at me with a straight face and say Ichiro wasn't a Hall of Famer, Tony Gwynn wasn't a Hall of Famer, Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't a Hall of Famer, Greg Maddux wasn't a Hall of Famer, Jeter wasn't a Hall of Famer. Like, just stop trying to make a name for yourself and be a tough guy, all you people, the baseball writers. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, yeah, that bothers me every year when you have such an obvious candidate not get in unanimous. It's dumb. I don't understand it. Anyways, moving on, going to talk about the national championship game. Ohio State beat Notre Dame 34-23. They jumped out to a big lead. Notre Dame kept fighting, took advantage of an Ohio State fumble deep in Notre Dame territory, got down to 8, and then Jeremiah Smith made a big play, and Ohio State won the game. I mean, what it came down to was, Freeman's a great coach, and they Notre Dame didn't fold in the face of adversity. They kept fighting, but in the end, Ohio State just had much better athletes and much more talent, and that's what won out. And Ryan Day's taken a lot of heat, and deservedly so, honestly. But in some ways, I mean, but at the same time, like, it's so obvious that like those kids in that locker room for Ohio State love him. I mean, look, you could see him and Jack Sawyer after the game. You can see how they were enthusiastic about dumping the Gatorade on him. Oh, like it's so obvious. Like those guys in that locker room will go to war for Ryan Day, and that's why even before NIL and he was able to get guys to come because he seems like he relates really well to these kids, and they will run through a wall for him. They did everything for him, I think in this postseason run because they knew about the heat he was getting after they lost to Michigan again. So, yeah, credit to him for righting the ship after that Michigan loss. Credit to those players for, going all out for him because they loved him. They deserve credit for that. And I don't want to hear any of these arguments about how, oh well, they didn't win the Big Ten, but because of the expanded playoffs they got in, they won the national championship. That's BS. No, no. I mean, because first of all, you got to remember Alabama won a 14 playoff without winning the SEC in 2017. Wild cards win the World Series in baseball and the Super Bowl in the NFL, and even in other college sports, like plenty of teams in March Madness win it without winning their conference. I mean, most recently, UConn, the first of their back-to-back, when they beat the Aztecs in the national championship game, they finished tied for fourth in the Big East. I mean, just because it's not traditional doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, I don't. You got to adapt to the times. I'll compare the Ohio State to this 2023 in baseball. Texas Rangers, they lose the American League West on the last day of the season. And they got praised because they had to be resilient and start the playoffs on the road in Tampa Bay instead of going straight to the division series and being at home. They won they won that series in Tampa Bay on the start a World Series run. They won it all and they got praised for it. Ohio State kind of did the same thing, They would have been in the Big Ten championship game if they didn't lose that game to Michigan. They did, but they picked themselves up and rallied and showed their talent in this playoff run. I mean, you have to give them credit for that. And another thing I want to say is that the reason why college football, it was one of the last sports that I really got into and started to love. And the reason for it was because I never liked how it seemed like one bad game and like you're done. Like your national championship aspirations were over. And if you were a great team, which I didn't think was fair because, like, you face another top five team, it's a close game and you lose because of a field goal or trap game on the road in a tough environment, you lose, or something weird happened in the game that doesn't usually happen. And if you played that game again nine other times, if you played that game 10 times, you'd win nine, and that just happened to be the one. And there's really some great teams that like suffered this fate. 2006 Michigan, they were 11-1. Their only loss was by 3 at Ohio State in a number one versus number two game. They didn't get a chance to play for national championship. Um, You look at 2012 Oregon, they went 11-1. Their only loss was to Stanford in overtime. It was rainy and their kicker missed a field goal in overtime. They didn't get a chance to play for a national championship. Obviously 2013 Auburn, they lost Alabama, sorry, they lost to Auburn on the kick six for their only loss of the season. And they didn't get a chance to play for the national title, when the kicker missed um the the starting kicker missed three field goals, and then they brought in the other kicker who missed the field goal that Chris Davis ran back for a touchdown. If they play that game 10 times, Alabama probably wins it 7 out of 8, even though Auburn was really good that year, made the national title game, but they didn't get a chance. Going back to 2012, Kansas State was 11-1. Their only loss was at Baylor, and Baylor ended the season on a roll. So Kansas State didn't get to play for a national title. 2015, Ohio State. They were 11-1. Their only loss was on a last-second field goal to Michigan State, who won the Big Ten and was in the 4-team college football playoff. So many of these great teams that had really good players and were truly great teams just didn't get a chance because they lost a close game or something weird happened, and it really wasn't fair. I'll even throw 2007 West Virginia in this. They went 10-2, won the Big East. Their two losses were by a combined 12 points. The first one was number 18 South Florida in Tampa, and it was by a touchdown. And South Florida was 18 at the time. This was the West Virginia team with Pat White and Steve Slayton with Rich Rodriguez as coach. And then they lost that Pitt game. Pat McAfee missed two short field goals. Pat White got hurt during the game. It was just a weird game. And like, if they played Pitt 10 times, they'd win nine. That was the one, and the one screwed them out of a chance to play for a national title. So I don't know how you can say this expanded playoff is a bad thing. Um, in my opinion. I mean, Ohio State lost 2 games by by a combined 4 points in the regular season, and then they got the chance to get in, and they showed their talent. So I don't understand why people think this is a bad thing. It's mostly just these stubborn old school traditionalists, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't like it. Anyways, moving on from that, congrats to Ohio State. I'm no Ohio State apologist by any means, as you guys know, but I think them being in the playoff, getting a chance to play for a national title was fair, and they deserve to win. So kudos to them. Looking ahead to some Aztec basketball. Tuesday mornings bracketology on ESPN. Joe Lenardi has the Aztecs as the last four buys. As the very last team, they're down to 64 actually, because last four in is those teams that play in the first four, those play-in games. To where if you win, you go to round 64. In day in, those are the last four teams in. So basically, the last four buys is teams 61 through 64. And Lenardi of the Aztecs at 64. So literally the last team guaranteed to be in the round of 64. There's no margin for error. For the first time in 3 years, the Aztecs are officially on the bubble. And they got to win this Air Force game on Wednesday night, in my opinion, by 20 plus. And then Saturday, you got a unique opportunity, I think, against Nevada and Reno, because I don't think Nevada's particularly good, but they have a net that's just barely high enough to be considered a quad one road game. So they're not that good, but it's technically a quad one game. So that's a big opportunity for the Aztecs, in my opinion, that they absolutely need to take advantage of. But first things first, blow out Air Force. Don't even make it close, because Air Force is so terrible that a close win will hurt the metrics here. As I said last time, there's some weak links on this team for sure, but there's also have shown plenty of potential at times. Being Creighton, being Houston, winning at Boise, that's another quad one game. So just figure it out, guys. You can do it. Like, need to see some consistency here. And as I mentioned last time as well, Dutch has got to figure out the rotation. I'm amazed he hasn't figured it out this late in the season. It's unusual for him, but again, maybe he's not the best coach for a young team like this, and they're just gonna have to figure it out. Little concerning though, but hopefully this week they can prove something. Now I'm gonna move on to something that on the Fair Territory show on YouTube that Ken Rosenthal was saying. I mean, he was making his argument that you know the Dodgers weren't bad for baseball because you need this big bad villain that other teams want to beat, and that it helps ratings in the sport because when your team beats that team, it's super exciting for them, and they everyone wants to see, oh, can this team beat the big bad guy that slay the dragon, whatever. Like, and I mean, it's so to say they're not killing. And so he's basically saying people who say the sport's dead because of this, and but there's no metrics to support it. Honestly, he's right. Bringing up the increased ratings for the World Series, the increase in attendance. I think the increase in games viewed on MLB.TV, I think is what he said. So he said the opposite of that claim is supported by the opposite of that claim. So the opposite of that claim, the thing that he claimed of that attendance and viewership is up and the sport's healthy, is supported by metrics. I mean, that's true, but that's for now. If they win these next two World Series or whatever, something like that, or just cruise doing it, it's not even close, then is it still going to be that way? I don't know. We'll see. But for now, he's right. And, I'm not a big Ken Rosenthal fan. I don't think anybody in San Diego is for obvious reasons. But he actually did make some very fair points in this, although I do disagree with him partially, and I'll get into that. He acknowledged there can be tweaks to level the playing field, such as counting all deferrals against the CBT and not using this present day value, which means that much will count against the CBT. The example he used was if Otani's costs the Dodgers 70 million against the CBT number instead of 46, because 46 million a year was the present day value. Um, I also like how he talked about, give the smaller markets more draft picks, and he's definitely right that people aren't walking away in droves like social media claims. Um, and that it's ridiculous to just give the Dodgers the trophy without the season being played. I've alluded to that in past podcasts. Actually, talked quite great detail about it. So I just want to take that, and he's right because you know roundness of the sport, and you also remember too when you get these super teams in other sports, and I want to remind people that the Kevin Durant Warriors were considered going so over the top. They were so loaded. It was so ridiculous, most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. And yeah, they won, two championships in the 3 years there. But you gotta remember the second year, um, if Chris Paul didn't get hurt in the Western Conference Finals, Houston was up 3 games to 2 on Golden State with Game 6 at home in Houston. I mean, then they good chance they don't win that year and only get one ring in 3 years. And I know someone's gonna say, well, they were hurt in 2019 when they lost to Toronto. Isn't that just an argument that injuries are part of the game, and that's another reason you can't hand these teams a trophy before games are played? Yeah. Another example of people saying the super teams that ruined a sport and talking still staying in the NBA. Remember the big three Miami Heat? They went to the finals all 4 years. Because they only won two of them though, and the 2 years they did win, they were down 3-2 to Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2012, and then in 2013 they were down 32 to San Antonio in the finals, and they needed that Bosch offensive rebound, Allen three-pointer just to force overtime after coming back from down 13 in the fourth quarter. So even the two championships in those 4 years they won were, you know, not easy, close calls. And this is in the NBA. Those examples are in the NBA. The NBA is far less random than baseball. I mean, the best team wins so much more often in the NBA than MLB. So I think it's all fair points by Ken Rosenthal. And I did like that he did acknowledge, like, yeah, we can do things to even the playing field, like those things he suggested. And he suggested there will be tweaks to the CBA. The one thing I disagree with him about is that he said that fans think he said like if you want to sell he said if you want a salary cap, be prepared to sit out the 27th season. And he said because of how long the negotiations would go over that. Um, and he said like some fans would take that and some owners believe that too, which yeah, just more reason to believe that there's going to be real changes in the next CBA. Not going to go deep into that again, but this is where I disagree with him. He was like, it's going to undo these gains they've made in attendance and ratings. First of all, is are those ratings and attendance going to be the same if the Dodgers just dominate the next 2 years? Remember, I said if, because remember, they still have to play the games. So the ratings and attendance might not be going up going in the lockout. Number two, Maddie and I talked about that MLB trade rumors poll where 60% of people said they'd sacrifice a season to get a salary cap. Um, so it's not so it's what the fans want because they want something to level the playing field, at least in terms of acquiring players in the offseason. And then number three, he's like, oh, it would do undo this when he talks about undoing the gains they've made. The World Series in 1995 was had higher ratings than the World Series in 1993. So I don't know how much that really would hurt. And I know someone's gonna say, well, a Canada team um played in the World Series in '93, so that lowered ratings. I mean, so that would artificially lower ratings in the U.S. for that. I mean, sure, but enough to say like, oh, it would have, like if it was two U.S. teams, it would have been so high in um 1993 that you would it would said, oh wow, look at the drop in '95. It was two U.S. teams. I don't know about that. I don't think so. So basically, I just disagree with him on that. But overall, I thought he made some pretty interesting points about, hey guys, we still have to play these games. And, um, you know, basically he said the same thing. He's like, we still have to play these games for these reasons because he mentioned, injuries happen, other things happen. That's another thing we're going to get into talking about these Dodgers because injuries are apparently already happening because they signed our old friend Kirby Yates this morning. And when I saw this news, I was like, what the hell? They need another reliever? Oh my God. Excuse me. I was like, what is going on here? Like, come on. Like, this is over the top. But then, I hear later, like, Bob Nightingale said something like, oh, well, they're hearing Michael Kopech might be out the first month of he's going to be out the first month of the season. They're expecting that, so that's why they did it. And I was like, okay, fine, that makes sense. And I bet you Kopech has a pretty bad injury because they were talking about he's had arm troubles before. That's why the White Sox made him a reliever, and they were talking about the thing where he was like Dave Roberts said he was like pitching with like a forearm problem in the playoffs. But so maybe that forearm acted up on him again, and you know what forearms usually lead to. So it's probably one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, the forearm, the elbow forearm thing he pitched through in the postseason got worse and didn't heal. He's not throwing, and then like you'll hear you'll hear in like late April, mid-April, oh, he's done for the season. He's having Tommy John. I mean, because we saw with Musgrove how those if you try to pitch through that, eventually you can only give so much until it snaps. And that's like I said, a guy who's had arm trouble before. So whatever. I mean, and just I kind of talked about this when they signed Scott. Relievers are just so volatile in general. So this isn't like some outrageous thing. You know, as many of the options as they have now out there, Evan Phillips was terrible for a time in the midsummer last year. Alex Vesia was terrible in 2023. Blake Trinan's hurt a lot. I talked about how Tanner Scott could easily regress too. I mean, so it looks amazing on paper now, but again, things happen. And Kirby himself, he's 38, got injury history, and last year was really his first good season since that 2019 season with us. So who knows how good he'll be even. I mean, and as far as the team as a whole, like I talked about this a little bit. Their over under right now is 103 and a half. Over that's probably safe, but if it gets any higher, just stay away because honestly, they might not even match what they do in 2022 when they won 111. And I'll just say this: why did I say that? Because I was looking at this out of curiosity, and the 2022 team. I talked about how you don't think you're going to be. That article said that they don't think they can get even 140 innings out of a lot or all these guys. I mean, I think they get one or two that get like around 150, 160, but they're not going to get these innings totals that they got in 2022. They got 170 and two-thirds innings of Tyler Anderson and his 2.57 ERA, and 175 innings of a 2.16 ERA from Julio Arias. Nobody on this 25 team for them will come close to those innings. Like I've said, some good models for what you might expect are something like Tony Gonsolin had a 2.14 ERA and 130 and a third, and Kershaw had a 2.28 ERA and 126 and a third. I mean, those are probably, something more in the ballpark of what you expect these starting pitchers are going to do for them, but even those ERAs are really low, so that's going to be hard to match. Those ERAs are pretty low, so it's just like, you compare it to the 111 win team, and you're like, wow, those numbers are really low. As good as these guys are, can they really match that? So, you know. And I saw something today. My friend Jake sent it in our group chat. It was a tweet that said the guy was saying, "Oh, the Dodgers JV rotation is better than most teams' starting rotation," and this is part of what Ken Rosenthal was talking about with like how people just like want to crown them before the season starts and make these outrageous claims about how they've ruined the sport, and so over the top, which the playing field's not level, and he not acknowledged that. But well, this tweet was ridiculous. It said their JV rotation was Kershaw, he signs May, Miller, Gonsolin, Stone. Okay, first of all, if Kershaw even signs, he's a shell of what he was. Dustin May will get injured after like 5 games. Gonsolin's coming off a major injury, and he's not going to repeat what he did in 22. Stone's out this season, and then Bobby Miller was god awful last year. So, yeah, I mean, sure they have good depth, but that JV rotation would not be better than most teams' actual rotations. It'd be if that was a team's actual rotation, like it'd be middle of the pack at best. Would the White Sox be thrilled to have that rotation compared to what they have? Yeah, but it's not, better than most teams' actual rotations. That's just false. I actually think if that was a team's 1 through 5, it would be honestly probably below average. I mean, And that's why, when injuries happen, again, you got to play the games. That kind of shows it. And then you look at their lineup real quick. That article talked about the age of guys in their lineup. Let's go through it position by position real quick. Catcher Will Smith's OPS that year was 801 and 22. It's gone down 2 years in a row since then. Freddie Freeman's getting up there, so who knows if he gets a 918 OPS again. The Kim guy for them will probably post a line similar to what Lux did in 2022, maybe a little bit better. Lux hit 276, 346 on base, 399 OPS that year. We've seen, 339 slugging. We've seen with other guys how, hitting doesn't always translate from the KBO to the US. So it's not, so he'll probably post something similar to 22 Lux. Mookie Betts and Teoscar Hernandez at shortstop and right field. That's probably about the same thing as Mookie, and they'll have Betts and Teoscar Hernandez taking the shortstop and right field spots this year. They'll probably get roughly the same production that they got out of the right field and shortstop spots when it was Mookie Betts and Trey Turner. So that's like half the lineup right there. Now you do have some upgrades. Muncie's gonna have a better year than he did in 22. Michael Conforto's probably an upgrade over their 2022 left fielders. Tommy Edmonds an upgrade over their 2022 center fielders, and of course, Otani's better than Justin Turner at DH. But like I just mentioned, there's at least three spots that probably aren't better, and two likely downgrades compared to 2022. And Conforto and Edmond, they're not bad players, but they're not superstars. So they're probably only modest upgrades of those two positions, especially because Trace Thompson did post a 901 OPS and 239 play appearances, playing a lot of left field and a lot of center. So, I mean, when you look at the two, I mean, they're pretty comparable. So, and talking about the going back to their bullpen, yeah, it looks unbelievably stacked on paper, but you saw Kopech's already injured, and the Dodgers had a 2.87 bullpen ERA in 22, and they had seven relievers that pitched at least 25 games for them that had an ERA of under 2.5. Yancy Almonte was barely over one. So even for how good their bullpen looks on paper, it's going to be hard to match what the 2022 bullpen did. And remember, this Dodgers team we're talking about, they didn't even win a playoff series. They lost it to us in 4 games when we didn't have to tease. So again, the games still have to be played. And I'm going to close this out talking about the Padres real quick. For those reasons I listed above, I do still support them, trying to make the playoffs and getting as a wild card because things can happen in the playoffs. But I do understand both sides of the coin when it's like, you know, retool, do a soft reset, trade some expiring contracts, or let's go for it. We were close last year. I understand both directions, especially with the ownership uncertainty. I just want them to pick a direction either way, basically. And it seems like with this activity they haven't yet, and that's frustrating. Like, pick a side, guys. Come on. One thing I will say is that there are rumors from a credible account that Maddie sent me. That this account, I think it's. Let me make sure I get this username right here. It's oh sorry, it's Mock Bomb MOCC Bomb on X. Maddie sent me his thing. Apparently he had Kyle Tucker getting traded to the Cubs. Apparently he was on top of, the developments that were happening with Sasaki and when Christian Walker when he signed with Houston. So this guy seems pretty credible to me. Maddie sent me a rumor that the Padres and Braves have discussed Atlanta Braves have discussed a cease trade, and I support this because he's one of those guys not coming back after 2025 anyways. With him making 13 million in arbitration, I believe it is, compared to what some of these starting pitchers are getting on the market, that makes him very valuable, even just for 1 year. And a potential return could get you something that could help you in 25. So he wouldn't necessarily be waving the white flag on 2025 just because you do have a high floor because of, Jackson Merrill, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Yu Darvish, Michael King, and a good bullpen. You do have a pretty high floor. So, I mean, I kind of support that. It's the Tampa Bay Rays, Cleveland Guardians line of thinking where like you trade proven guys on expiring contracts. media and your own fan base are like, "What are you doing? Why aren't we trying to win?" And then you end up getting pieces and you win anyways. Like I've talked about that before, so I would definitely support that. I'll just close this out by saying if they do want to make the playoffs and you can only choose to upgrade between one of center field or left field, you choose catcher because you can win if you have Tirso Ellis and Brandon Lockridge in left field. Even if you play Lockridge every day and batted him ninth, I think you can make the playoffs that way. But if you don't have at least a decent catcher situation, you're screwed. Catcher is too important of a position. We've seen this in the past with Padre teams. And the Luis Campusano, Brett Sullivan, Martin Maldonado options are just not good enough. So you can only upgrade one, upgrade catcher. That's all I got for tonight, guys. Just wanted to say those things real quick. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more probably after the conference championship games on Sunday. Peace out, fellas.